a wonderful time to be alive in this universe, on this earth. A vision from here forward. Theodore Roosevelt was the first president to ride in a plane, submarine, car, and use a telephone. He dared and did where others wondered and worried. He also built the Panama Canal, which many said could not be done. The point is, he looked forward and was a man of action, shaping the future. That is how we must be thinking today. Almost 110 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt gave his famous Man in the Arena speech, where he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." Historically, America has always dared greatly and been rewarded for our daring. We pioneered human space exploration, human space flight. These acts of daring did not come without sacrifice, including loss of astronauts, time, and resources, but they did deliver the future. America was not only the first, and today remains the only nation to land men on the moon. Those investments in daring returned everything from satellite communications to artificial limbs, from fire equipment, solar cells, and insulin pump, Velcro to scratch, resistant contact lenses, from plastics to iPhones, and shock-absorbent running shoes. The polymers in our spacesuits now save lives in fire-resistant suits for firefighters, while space-based water filtration technology now saves lives in remote places around the Earth. And think of the other rewards from daring to go into space. Wireless headsets, smoke detectors, freeze-dried foods, yuck. Tiny, hardy cameras, air purifiers, memory foam, ear thermometers, airplane de-icing, endless computer innovations, and the list goes on and on. All because we dared. So where are we today? On the cusp of another era of daring? I hope so. We should encourage 4 big steps forward. And here they are. First, we need to think more internationally, creating synergies in space at the international level. Why not an alliance? For example, of the top international space agencies, including America, Europe, Russia, China, Japan, and perhaps others, with the top private sector leaders, in an effort to get the best of all parties and get us back to the moon for good, and then on to Mars and beyond. Synergies take leadership and effort to create, and that also boils down to daring. It is time. Second, we should start thinking more about public-private partnerships in the United States. Getting daring public sector to match daring in the private sector, public and private. The way daring in the private sector picked up the baton and ran with it in what we started in Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, and Shuttle. We get more done when we work together. Right now, we could use more innovation, a clearer memory of how we efficiently got to the moon. More reliance on synergies created by public-private effort. Third, we need to refocus ourselves on what works, on hard and fast goals, efficient ways to space, the moon, and Mars, not allowing waste, profiteering, or ego to get in the way of achievement. That was how Apollo worked. But the Soviets nipping at our heels, we got there first. We did not do that to make money, but to achieve a national goal. In my view, the military-industrial space complex often acts on the notion that more spending is better, more profit is the goal, and more time is just fine. These assumptions are all three wrong. Efficiency is better than just throwing more money and infrastructure at space. Profit is fine and a valuable motivator, but it is not the motivation that got us to the moon. That was the combination of national security, national pride, and higher purpose. Finally, time does matter. At almost 90, I can tell you time is a precious resource. Having good eyes is also. We have spent a lot of time over the past 40 years on wishful thinking. I think if you had every past moonwalker and Apollo astronaut here today, they would all say, enough wishful thinking. Let's get back to action. High national purpose, the moon and Mars. Fourth and last, we need to think more about space as the future. And that means turning our attention to the next steps in human spaceflight. There are still many unanswered questions about life support, radiation, re-entry speeds, returning from Mars, and how we establish a simple, cost-efficient, reusable, and increasingly routine infrastructure for human presence on the moon, Mars, and in space. And efficient cycling spacecraft continually in motion, moving by one and the other object. A transway in space to and from established inhabited destinations. My concern about preserving and enhancing institutional knowledge has caused me to set up the Human Spaceflight Institute in Texas, and increasing with nodes of participants, academic, and a few brainy folks that I'll select, in addition to myself. I hope around the nation and the world with academies, engineers, and astronauts, all doing what they can, the thinkers and the doers who will define our future, working together on expanding human presence in space. That is my wish for legacy. Where does that leave us? Where Theodore Roosevelt would be looking today for the future, he might, if alive today, be thinking about the first president to fly in space. Or perhaps just the first to watch humans set foot and stay on the moon, set foot and set up a camp on Mars. In all events, he would expect a great deal of this great nation, America, the world. And he would expect a great deal of all of us here today. Which is why we should start to expect more of ourselves and make it happen. I have a few tidbits to toss out. These are not part of formal remarks, but I think they may be of interest to quite a few people. We have an item in our future called a gateway. A gateway is a barrier unless it is opened. If it just continues to go around, it's expensive to maintain, and it's not doing very much. To get there by 2024, we're going to start with a mini gateway. The fellow engineer said to me after I talked about my trans-orbit craft between low Earth orbit and lunar orbit, he said, "You've just taken the gateway and you're moving it back and forth." And I said, "Yeah, sort of. But when it leaves Earth orbit, it takes the crew with it. And it gets to lunar orbit. And it meets up with a lander. And the new crew gets in the lander, the old crew gets out." Now they can talk to each other for a week or so before the old crew comes back with the Orion back, penetrates the atmosphere, and lands on Earth. But the trans-orbit craft, consisting of support systems, parts of the initial gateway, the power propulsion element, some of the other support items, it keeps going. And it gradually comes back with solar electric propulsion, saving fuel. So it gets back to Earth orbit for the next orbit that goes to the moon. It takes a while, maybe, to get back. Now, in a couple of years, I hope we develop a craft that goes to the moon, comes back, and we reuse it. It aero captures. It's a buzz craft. And when John starts telling me time to get off, it's time to bring up some other people and chat about all these good things. Dr. Aldrin.
panelists will join us. Rick Armstrong, Doug Wheeler. We even have formal introductions, more than just needed for Buzz. Rick is an independent consultant and software developer and a musician with Edison's Children, which is a progressive rock band. I'm too old to understand what progressive rock means compared to anything else. And he's a member of the board of trustees of the Astronautical Scholarship Foundation, and has been traveling the world this year as part of the kind of moving team of people celebrating this anniversary. Very much. Has had 2 space flights and 178 days in space. STS-120 in 2007 in the International Space Station, where he commanded Expedition 25. He's an Army pilot with 38 combat missions under his belt. He's flown 46 different aircraft and spacecraft. Was the NASA man in Star City for a number of years, and is still waiting for the next flight. Hopefully soon. Gentlemen.
Thank you.
As I said, you've been traveling a lot in the past 6 or 8 months in celebrations of the Apollo anniversary. Give me the 1 or 2 impressions you carry away from the interactions in those celebrations.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that the Apollo program still means a lot to a lot of people.
Why?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that specifically for all of them, but I would say that the inspirational value of what was done back then had an amazing impact on so many people all around the world, and they still like to talk about
that. Doug, as someone involved in 21st century spaceflight, what impact does Apollo have on your organization, your conduct, not you specifically, but today's space flyers?
Well, thank you, John. I feel very fortunate because I was a wee little boy when I watched Buzz and Neil walking on the surface of the moon. And I knew it was a huge event, but I grew up in a very small place on the west side of the Catskills in upstate New York. And of course, that was in July. When we started school in September, we had a brand new teacher. And I was just going into the 4th grade. Her name was Christine West. And I remember her coming in. She was right out of teaching school. And we used to kid with her that she would, she came to this little school to pay penance. But she said, "Who saw the moon landing?" And I raised my hand. And she said, "One day you could do that too." And we thought she was crazy. And it was years later at an astronaut reunion that I had a little chat with Neil Armstrong. And Neil shared with us that night that his thoughts when he was on the moon, and Buzz had shared similar thoughts where they thought about the teachers that taught them through the years, the engineers that built the rocket. And I remember Neil said to all of us, he said, I sat there wondering, how does a young boy from Wapakoneta, Ohio, end up standing on the moon? And we all kind of chuckled a little bit, and the reality set in at that point was like, we're all just ordinary kids from ordinary places with extraordinary dreams. And so the Apollo mission is what gave me hope for me to be involved in NASA. And so I got to NASA in the late 90s, and my last name is Wheelock, so they call me Wheels. And now the younger astronauts call me Papa Wheels. So I feel very privileged to be in a position where I can bridge that gap now to where we press off. Apollo had a twin sister, Artemis, the goddess of the moon. And now we're going back to the moon, and we're going to stay there. And we're going to, by 2024, we're going to see the first woman and the next man step foot on the lunar surface. And that's very, very exciting for me. And in my latest, the last couple of years, as John had mentioned, I've been working in Star City, training our astronauts to go to the space station. And we just witnessed the first unmanned spacewalk about a week and a half ago. We have two women outside, Christina Cook and Jessica Meir, and I'm so proud of them. And they know that Papa Wheels is proud of them as well. But this is so exciting for us now because the future is ours. It's ours to claim. Just like, much like Buzz was saying, it starts from here in the human spirit, and that's the gift that NASA has given to me. And I am so excited to be part of this grand adventure and bridging the gap from Apollo and what we learned from that and take it on to Artemis, back to the moon to stay, and on to Mars as well.
Thank you.
Perfect example of what I was talking about.
Right, exactly. Buzz, I have a somewhat technical question for you, and you have to hold the mic close, I'm told. Your bosses back at the Johnson Space Center, Bob Gilruth and George Lowe in particular, suggested, in fact, canceled 2 Apollo missions because of their high risk and some cost elements. Did you folks that had actually flown the missions get involved in the discussions of the risks involved and how you thought they were acceptable?
I was kind of long gone by that time.
No, it was not
moved on back to the Air Force. But what you're describing is something that all of us, I think, in the astronaut business did not believe, that we felt that the risk was the reason that we would cut short that magnificent program. We had funding difficulties. We had a conflict going on in Southeast Asia. We had lots of different pressures. Man, we can see them today, the different swings back and forth of the sense of what we should be doing. Should we be doing Apollo applications, doing more activities on the moon? What about preparing to go the next place? I regret to say that whatever the reason was, it placed a horrible barrier in progress from what we had built together in spirit, cooperation, interplay of industry and government, and unity of objectives. Sure, we used the rocket to begin to build a space station of its four parts, the upper stage, and we built Skylab. And we learned a good bit out of that. And I think that set the stage for the Russians to put up the Mir space station. But before I left NASA in April of '71, I had been at the Air Force Academy for 2 years before I went over to Germany to sit on alert with nuclear weapons. Then I came back from there to MIT, then got into the space program. But having been at the Air Force Academy when it first opened up, I thought, geez, when I leave astronaut business, that's a good way to get back into the service. After 11 years, 3.5 from MIT, 7.5 in Houston, man, a great idea. The only trouble was I had a classmate whose last name was Vandenberg, and he got that job. So they decided to send me to command the test pilot school. I had not wanted to go through the test pilot school training before. I wanted to stick with operational combat preparation units, and I still do. Not testing airplanes. Not that that isn't a wonderful profession for very, very dedicated, talented people. And my commander in Apollo 11 was the epitome of that kind of a professional test pilot.
What was his name again?
Oh, the all-American boy.
I have a question for Rick related to his father.
Okay.
No, I'm not going to talk about the movie. I'll just ask the question. January the 1st, 1969, Neil Armstrong. A couple of weeks before he was announced as the commander of Apollo 11. January 1st, 1970, Neil Armstrong, having been the first person to step on the moon. Was there any difference in the person?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he said, I can remember that he felt like some people treated him differently after the flight, and he didn't know why that should have been. So I think he was, he was a very principled guy, and nothing was going to change that. So, I mean, what changed was the external,
the surrounding,
the demands on his time, and it's impossible to explain how much that was really. But internally, no, I think he was exactly the same.
Great. Doug, you've had the experience in Russia in making a partnership work between two very proud countries with their own ways of doing business. Has that made you a stronger advocate of international cooperation? How have you dealt with all the inevitable problems of making different cultures work together? And then you commanded the station. Who was on your crew while you were commanding Expedition 25?
So we had 3 Russian cosmonauts and 3 U.S. astronauts on our crew.
But no other countries for
No other countries during my mission.
Yeah.
We were right at the tail end of the assembly of the space station.
Okay, so
we
the other
just
modules
into
weren't up there.
utilization. Well, we actually had all the modules up there at that point, and we were just bringing it to full utilization for all the laboratories on board. But my time in Russia, I look back now, and it's the most enriching moments of my life because I was a little nervous going over there, of course. My Russian was horrible to begin with, and actually Alexei Leonov, the very first spacewalker where we just lost a week or so ago, Alexei was such a great mentor to us because he was a true ambassador in helping us. He told me some funny stories about his learning to speak English during the Apollo Soyuz days. And so we kind of laughed about that, but the enriching parts of it, what I found out very, very quickly working over there, that fire that burns inside of our heart and our spirit, the human spirit, the spirit of exploration, the spirit of just wondering what's over that next horizon, those fires burn ever so brightly and just as strong in the spirit of the children and the cosmonauts and the Russian people as well. So it was a beautiful experience. Obviously it was difficult sometimes, geopolitical things going on, but at our level, at the cosmonaut level, the cosmonaut astronaut level, we were one team. Одна команда, we used to say, one team in space and on Earth and training. Through this opportunity, I've had opportunities to spend time with political officials over there as well as the president of Russia, and all of them, when we talk about collaboration and cooperation, they all point to the International Space Station. We can get along up there, we can work together to build the most amazing engineering feat of all time, this castle in the sky. If we could do that, we could surely do that here on Earth as well.
Thank you. Buzz. In your long career since Apollo 11, you've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of U.S. presidents and vice presidents, maybe even today. You have any anecdotes to share about those interactions and what they've thought about why we should be doing this and what we should be doing? Or is that privileged conversation?
No. Well, I'm not sure maybe which comes first. I remember President Carter introduced us to the public as Apollo 2. One. Ever since, Apollo 11 is X1 for me, just so you don't make a mistake. It was a most moving trip that the crew made after Apollo 11 came back and we were out of quarantine. 3 flights were in quarantine. We were the first arbitrary 21 days after we left the surface of the moon. When we got out of quarantine, we made a trip to New York, met the mayor, a parade, went to Chicago, Mayor Daley, a parade, went to Los Angeles, a state dinner, President Nixon. The crews were given the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then we went back and changed our clothes a little bit more, and then we went on this round-the-world trip to Mexico, Colombia.
50 years ago today, you were in Africa.
Where?
Africa.
Ah, yes. At high noon, 7 national anthems with the sweat. King Mabutu. That was an experience, and we had many different ones. In India, visiting with the Shah and Faradiva. In Spain, Franco.
Marshal Tito.
Oh yes, and the boss in Yugoslavia was not Marshal Tito, but Madame Rose. At least that's what people. And it was just a fantastic trip, and it was called Giant Step. And I have been dreaming of another trip called the Next Giant Leap, made up of the international partners, space agencies, NASA, ESA, Russia, Japan, China, and then we bring in the commercial SpaceX, Blue Origin. And it's an alliance that's open to other India, Australia, Saudi Emirates, And I even talked today about bringing Canada out of the European Space Agency and partnering them with Mexico and Brazil here in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, I think it's that kind of coalition that's going to make something in the future happen.
I like the word coalition. It sounds like you've decided who you are and that's it.
So what word do you like?
I'd like an alliance of those capable of doing something.
So you have to be able to contribute, not just for political reasons.
Oh, yeah.
That is a contribution.
And it has a Space Exploration Operations Center, Mission Control in Houston, Texas. And what we need is a Space Exploration Operations Plan. Not our plan, NASA's, not Europe's. We have to come together, not a UN or anything like that. It's going to take people with the background of bringing ideas together to try and figure out how we can equitably come up with something that aims toward the future. My Human Spaceflight Institute is going to take diverse points of view, and it's going to be sort of toned down by the aerospace company.
They're going to make you behave rationally.
Think very carefully about what that is. It's an end run around vested interest, big companies, lobbyists who know where the workforce manufactures.
So you want to put this town out of business?
So they know just where to go in the House and Senate for appropriations and space subcommittees. And the budget comes out, goes to NASA for oversight. The lobbyists get there. Where NASA doesn't have a chance. That's what they do. And that's how we got to where we are today, in my opinion.
Rick. Your professional hat on, not your musician hat, but your information technology world hat. Or can you see a time where we stop sending humans and let our machines, our artificial intelligence, our robotic ambassadors do most of the exploration? Or are people always going to be necessary?
Well, prediction is risky business, but and I would kind of go back to one of your first slides where
it's man, not merely machines.
Yeah, there's at some point in the far future when there's equivalent capabilities between AI, even then maybe that question becomes a valid one. But for now, or for any of the foreseeable future, there's so much value that the human has that just a Mars rover can take a very long time to figure out how to do something that a human could do in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
They can. So from a practical matter, I think that humans' importance is going to be there for as long as I can see. And the other factor, I think, is you can't forget, going back to what I said about inspiration. I'm not sure that machines doing work, I mean, that's very cool and inspiring, but does that impact kids the same way as people out there?
Well, Doug has been spending a lot of his time this week in Washington in schools. Do you feel like you could be substituted by some sort of machine?
No, I think robots are tremendous cavalry, though. We can send them ahead to scout out where a good landing site is, where a good place to set up a science platform or a habitat or something, and it can sense what resources are there in the regolith and maybe in the trace atmosphere like on Mars. So robots are definitely needed, but then that's just to prepare the way for a blueprint to land on that planet.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about preparing the way. Now, once you get there, and you got people, you'd like to send the robots out to do the dirty work. Okay? And now, let me pose you a question, since you're on the cusp, sort of. When we go to the moon, and Blue Origin, Blue Moon sets up their industry there, I really don't see why more and more people really have to stay there for the rest of their lives. We can take people up for 30 days, a year, and we can bring them up. Every time a spacecraft goes up, comes back down, we can bring other people back down. If you have enough spacecraft. Now, I've done the same thinking with regard to Mars. And if you bring the same number of people back that you send up there, there is a steady state number of people, depending on like 6 people up and down, somewhere around 36, 54, that's all. If everybody comes back.
So we would not settle Mars. We would not
Well, not that way. Now, here I am a member, or you are a member, of the pool of 50, 60 people selected, and we'd like you to commit to go to Mars and stay there. But you're not so sure about that, so what we're going to do...
Put your mic on.
Oh, what we're going to do is train you, send you to the moon. You're going to spend several weeks there, seeing what it's really like. Okay, then you're going to come back. And as you approach age 30, you're mature enough to come to grips and make the commitment to migrate. And that is sincerely what I believe we should be doing. We should be preparing on the moon the steps, the habitats, all the support systems. While we're executing things, we should be doing that at Mars so that when those first people get there, they don't stay a year and a half and then come back and then send another group that stays there a while, and then they come back. I mean, they work real hard as the group to be the first group and the second. Now the third goes there, and they stay. They become the heroes of their nation, the pioneers, the pilgrims, the people of humanity who will be remembered in history. The guys who come back, they write a book, they play golf. And who cares? I'm really serious about how important it is to be able to commit to send people there, and that's where they're going to be. I'm sure that there will be reasons why there are exceptions, perhaps medical, perhaps some others.
Maybe
it's a great science fiction story I'm working on. That's to do with mental health.
We're about at the end of our assigned time.
I'm guessing that was a rhetorical question from Buzz. But very well said, Buzz.
Well, I have a question for you. When the picture of the Artemis 3 or 4 crew is put up on a screen like this one, you hope to be in it?
Oh, I likely won't be. I would love to be. I would love to be. But one thing I discovered, they don't call me Papa Wheels for anything, so for nothing. But so I'm a little bit older in the astronaut corps now. We have a lot of young folks coming along, and I discovered, you know, we're all kind of writing our own story, and in our story, we're the hero. And what I found is the magic in becoming a hero in someone else's story. And so my mission now is to make sure that our astronauts get there safely and get home safely as well. That part of Kennedy's speech, you know, return them safely to the Earth, is very important to us at NASA, of course. And I'm working in the area of safely returning our crews to Earth. I would love to be on that first mission.
Don't think it's likely.
I don't. I would love to be on it, and if I'm selected, I will joyfully go. But I will be rejoicing because I know that those first people to step foot back on the lunar surface, we all of us will have played a part in getting them there, and I'll be.
Not have come home had to do with the engine arm power supply.
Right, which you solved with a pen.
Well, yeah. There's a circuit breaker that has to be closed to get power to the circuit that goes to arm the engine. And the circuit breaker is out when you don't want the engine to light. And that's before you make the descent. When you land on the surface of the moon, you pull it out. So you're ready to go. Now if you're clumsy and moving around with that backpack in a pressurized cabin, I don't know where to point the finger.
Wasn't me.
Well, I had to be one of two. Well, we have reached the appointed end time. Let me remind people what I said at the start, that don't hope for autographs or I think even selfies tonight. It's too many people, and these folks are at the end of a long day. Let me thank Doug Wheeler. Let me thank Rick Armstrong. Buzz, a few minutes ago you talked about people who would be the ones that stay on the moon, on Mars, and who will be remembered in history. When we remember the history of the 20th century, the name Aldrin will be remembered. You're a piece of human history who's still doing it. Thank you for being here.
But I'm staying right here.